I'd like to introduce our two forum panel members tonight. We have Floyd Bain here. He's running for the 7th District seat, House of Representatives, and Bonnie Gerard running for the 4th against Randy Forbes, who's the incumbent there. What I'll do is I'll start off with just some candidate bios, a little introduction on the candidates that they've submitted that they wanted you to hear about them. I'll start with Floyd. Floyd was born and reared in Richmond, Virginia. He went to public schools in Richmond and graduated from John F. Kennedy High School in 1976. He went right into the family grocery business, which had as many as 3 supermarkets at one time. He also owned a private security business for a few years, working as a private investigator and a trainer of private investigators and armed and unarmed security officers. He recently earned a bachelor's degree in history with a minors in political science and education from Mary Baldwin College's adult degree program, and is substitute teaching currently in Chesterfield County. After his tenure in the House of Representatives, he hopes to teach full-time. Floyd has been married for 30 years and has 2 adult children, a daughter and a son. Floyd's wife, Susan, has been an elementary school teacher in Chesterfield County for 33 years. They have been residents of Midlothian since getting married in 1981. Floyd has voted Republican since he came of age, casting his first presidential vote for Ronald Reagan. As a lifelong student of history, Floyd has accumulated an extensive personal library on the history of the country and continues to add to it. His study of this subject has given him an insight into the creation of our nation that allows him to grasp the concept of limited federal government as envisioned by our founding fathers. It was Floyd's frustration with his Republican representatives and their lack of adherence to the Constitution and that concept of limited government that spurred him to run for office and challenge the status quo. He ran for the 7th District seat in 2010 as an independent and has garnered the most votes of any third-party candidate in a 3-way race in Virginia. It was after that election and his opponents' continued abuses of the Constitution and the Republican creed that Floyd received many calls and emails from 7th District constituents and Republican Party members asking him to return to the party and challenge for the seat in a primary race. Floyd has heeded that call and is here tonight to answer your questions and to try to impress upon you the need for a changing of the guard in Virginia's 7th District. And now Bonnie Gerard, candidate for 4th District. Bonnie Gerard is a Phi Beta Kappa graduate of the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, taking her bachelor's degree in political science in 1988. In 1987, as part of her UNC program, she accepted a fellowship and grant which took her to China for the next 14 years. She was one of only a handful of foreigners who chose to remain in Beijing during the 6-month period of martial law that prevailed after the Tiananmen Square massacre in 1989. She is fluent in Mandarin Chinese. Bonnie has been responsible for the negotiation and implementation of over $1 billion worth of telecommunications and other contracts in China. She was the first American woman to do business in post-1949 Shanghai. In 1990, Bonnie was hired by Alcatel to run their domestic operations in support of the implementation of digital phone systems throughout China. In 1994, she moved into commercial and business development in China for the company. In 1996, after 9 years in China and having witnessed at first-hand wholesale theft of foreign technologies by Chinese companies and the Chinese government, Bonnie became the first American in post-1949 China to open an independent consulting company to assist foreign firms in protecting their assets in China, performing due diligence in China, and other business matters. The consultancy was founded in the belief, since confirmed, that foreign companies needed reliable, intelligent, and ethical advice and approaches to the Chinese market that would enhance their commercial success there while protecting their intellectual property and worldwide market advantage. One of her core competencies is preventing dual-use technologies from reaching the Chinese military. Since bringing China Channel to the US in 2001, Bonnie spent another 4 years in China. Bonnie has been a vocal critic of the Chinese government, of the increasing American commercial dependence on China and of American short-sightedness in the China relationship. She is a frequent speaker on these and other issues related to China. For the past 10 years, she and her firm have been chosen by the Virginia Economic Development Partnership as a key partner to help Virginia companies export Virginia goods and services to China. She is a strong opponent of removing jobs from the United States and sending them to China. Bonnie met her British husband, Roland Evans, in China in 1998. She is the proud stepmother to 2 lovely girls, Rianne and Robin. Bonnie grew up in Washington, D.C. and Virginia, in a family long active in government, foreign service, and academics. She owes her interest and passion for foreign policy and politics to the influence of her family and their work in government and diplomacy. Raised in her grandparents' home, she was particularly inspired by her grandfather's work on behalf of the Pan American Foundation and her uncle's work in the Middle East and in Japan as ambassador for the United States. All right, next on the agenda, we'll have some opening statements from the 2 candidates, and we'll start, because he's closer, we'll start with Floyd Bain.
Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
I guess there's really no need for me to use the microphone. Gosh, where do I start? He pretty much covered a lot of it. Folks, I don't want to be a career politician. I'm not doing this because I want to get rich. I'm not doing this because I want to be powerful. I'm not doing this because I want to tell you how to live your life. We get enough of that already. I'm not just a candidate for office. I think people overlook this sometimes. I also live in the 7th District. I have to live under the laws that are passed in Washington and in our State House. And when those laws are abusive of our rights, when they contradict the Constitution, then someone has to step up and say, enough. We're going to stop doing this. We're going to reverse this trend. And I don't see that happening. We know it's not going to happen from the Democrat Party. We know they like to grow government. We know they think the government should be your nanny. So then, shouldn't the Republican Party be the antithesis of that? Shouldn't we have a party that says, no, we're not going to have big government. We're going to return to the Constitution and the concept of a limited federal government. Well, when our party is doing the exact same thing that the Democrat Party is doing, then we don't have 2 parties anymore, do we? And that's where I'm coming in. That's why people like me, Bonnie, Karen Pekowski in the 6th, is it Kenneth or Kevin? Ken Vaughn in the 11th District. You've got some choices this year of what we call liberty candidates, people who want to get back to the Constitution and understand what the enumerated powers are for the federal government. So when we come here tonight, we're going to answer your questions, and I'll be the first to tell you, if I don't know the answer to something, I'll tell you I don't know. But when I look for an answer, as your representative, if a question comes before me that I have to make a decision on, it's going to be based on this, the Constitution of the United States of America. Not on what's going to benefit me. And for those of you in here who are staunch party members, you're not going to like to hear some of this, but it's not going to have to do with what's best for the Republican Party. It's what's allowed in the Constitution, period. Because when I get to Washington, D.C., and I raise my hand and I take that oath to uphold and defend the Constitution, I'm not taking an oath to the Republican Party. I'm not taking an oath to anybody else or anything else but the Constitution of the United States. And if I fail in that oath, then shame on me. And if I do fail in it, and you don't hold me accountable, shame on you. Because that's your job, your responsibility in a free republic. Know who you're voting for, hold them accountable, and if they mess up, you don't hold them accountable by wagging your finger at them and saying, I told you not to do that, and if you do it one more time, I'm going to tell you not to do it again. That's not holding somebody accountable. When it comes to your elected representatives, you hold them accountable by not giving them your vote. Know who you're voting for, look at their voting record, and if it's not consistent with the Constitution, and in our particular case, in the Republican Party, if it's not consistent with the Republican creed, then they shouldn't be reelected. You shouldn't honor them with your continued support. So, at the end of the night, in my closing statements, I'll delve into this a little bit more. But I'm here tonight asking for your support. I'm hoping that the questions I answer for you tonight will help to garner that support. So feel free to ask me anything that comes to your mind.
Thank you, Floyd. Bonnie?
Thank you very much.
And you don't have to stand unless you want to.
I want to.
Okay.
I'm going to stand in front of the table, too. Floyd, wonderful remarks, as always. Sounds great. Hi, everybody. I'm Bonnie Gerard, and I'm running for the Republican nomination for the 4th Congressional District of Virginia. I wanted to let you know what spurred my interest in doing this, actually my passion. It goes to something that's in Floyd's bio, which was frustration. I tried working with my congressional representative, Randy Forbes. You heard throughout that really stuffy sounding bio. Believe me, during all those years I had a lot of fun too. But you heard one word repeated over and over in that biography, and it was China. And that is because I have spent such a long time there. I came back in 2001. I actually wrote to Jim Gilmore and I said, I'd like to, not that he knew me personally, he might have heard of me now, but I actually wrote to him and said, I'd like to come back, and with the experience that I have, I would like to serve Virginia with the understanding that I have of China, because there are some not very good things going on here, and I'd like to bring my understanding and my expertise to the service of the Commonwealth, and he provided me an avenue for doing that through the Virginia Economic Development Partnership. We've taken 2 trade missions to China to try to export Virginia goods and services. We have worked closely with Virginia companies to try to improve their bottom line, not by taking jobs to China, but by taking Virginia goods and services there and doing straightforward commercial transactions. It's nearly impossible. It's nearly impossible. I thought, therefore, when Randy Forbes was elected in 2001, and when he then founded and became chairman of the Congressional China Caucus, I thought, this is a match made in heaven. That here is someone with whom I can talk, a member of my party with an interest in my subject, and as far as I understood, and in terms of my personal relationship with him, I felt a very nice man. I still think he's a nice man, but I don't trust him anymore. And that's what set me off. The reason I don't trust him anymore is you heard that one of my core competencies is preventing military technologies or dual use, things that could be civilian but could also be militarily used by the Chinese, preventing those technologies from getting from here to them. We have export controls. They don't always work. Companies are sometimes greedy and they try to go around them. It's my goal to prevent the PLA, who killed 2 of my students in 1989, and another 2,310 people in the streets of Beijing where I was living, from ever having things that we develop here that they can use to kill more people in the streets of China. So I have a very personal and passionate reason for not wanting them to have our stuff, our goodies, other than the fact that they're ours. I tried talking to Randy Forbes about some of these issues, and I alerted him to some security breaches here in the Commonwealth. And I alerted him to these breaches 6 times. Twice personally, actually 3 times personally, and 3 times to his staff, both here in the district, well, in my district, and in Washington in a special meeting I had. Nothing was done. After a long period of nothing being done, people looked at me, people who knew the story, people in my part of the district, and said, Bonnie, you need to run. You have perhaps other qualifications which would make you perfect to run. I said I didn't know about that. First of all, I didn't have a lot of money. But when my husband looked at me and said, you have to run, that made all the difference in the world. Because it has to be a family effort. Otherwise, it might not be a family at the end of it. So, I'm running, and I'm proud to be running. And I want to talk about a couple of things that I think are key to, that are reasons for firing Randy Forbes because that's what we're doing. That's what all of us are trying to do. We're trying to fire the guys who are in and take their jobs, to put it in blunt and very stark terms. For me, it's jobs. It is really jobs. And I am disturbed and concerned that right now, Randy Forbes is using taxpayer money to go around the country to sell his vision of keeping a defense budget at an unprecedented level at a time when we are winding down our activities and our deployments overseas on the strength of some Chinese submarines that he is terrified, I suppose, will hit the waters of the Pacific and perhaps the Gulf and the Atlantic sometime in the near future if we don't keep a defense budget that is many times greater than most of the next 14 countries' budgets combined. I think it's a smokescreen. The Chinese capability militarily is not going to, does not create a reason for us to be $16 trillion in debt and going north in that number. It does not create it. My concern is, all these years, 10 years that he's been in office, in my district, 11 years, we have been riding on the defense budget, riding on military and military-related jobs, defense contractor jobs, and now they are going to go away. So how do you keep your campaign contributors happy? And who are his campaign contributors? They are defense contractors. Yes, there's the Sugar Association, but they are defense contractors. Randy Forbes sits on the House Armed Services Committee. He was chairman of the Readiness Subcommittee. And over the last 10 years, he has taken over $250,000 worth of campaign contributions from 19 defense contractors who are in the top 37 of this country who have been cited for fraud by the Department of Defense and the Department of Justice. Companies which have been convicted of criminal convictions, convicted of civil suits, and have made settlements because it was the only thing they could do to get out of the position they were in. So my feeling is he defending the defenders as he goes around the country on our money to keep the defense budget at the unprecedented levels, or is he defending the defense contractors? What I want to do is I want to build the private sector, not just in the 4th, but throughout the state. But my responsibility will be the 4th, and the way you do that is you market what you have. The VEDP does a wonderful job. Our Commerce Department does a wonderful job. Locals, boards of supervisors, town councils, they do a great job. But how much leverage do you have if you are the town of Crewe? You need somebody at a federal level who can leverage the position to entice and actually bring companies, good companies, in concert with the wishes of local areas. Bring those companies to your district. If you live in the 7th, you can do this as well. Bring those companies to your district and showcase what you have. Showcase your workforce, your cost of living, your education, the culture in which you live. We have tremendous opportunities for investment here in Virginia, which are not being realized, particularly in my area, Southside Virginia. We're supposed to be the #1 business state in the country. I want my district and yours to be the top 2 districts in our state, which is the number one state in the country for doing business. I think this is hugely important. There are many other issues in which I believe. Term limits. I absolutely believe in term limits, not just because you need to get the person out, but because you need to break those relationships that are made and forged over years and years of people being together in Congress. That is huge. It's not just getting the person out, it's breaking that web, breaking that network. These are several things that I'm very passionate about. China is one of them, but of more concern to me today are jobs, private sector jobs that pay for the taxpayer-funded jobs that we all want to keep. Our veterans who are coming home to an unemployment rate that is in many areas double and triple the national average. This is a shame. We can do something about it, but we have to have people who understand how the economy works, how business works, and that you never, ever, ever spend more than you earn. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bonnie. We're entering into our Q&A session now. I'd like to open with a question that was submitted by one of the RTP supporters online, and it's a question for both candidates. The first question I have is, the Virginia General Assembly voted to nullify the National Defense Authorization Act, stating it directly violates the 4th, 5th, and 6th Amendments to the U.S. Constitution. However, Congressman Cantor and Forbes both voted in favor of this legislation. Do you believe that the NDAA is constitutional or unconstitutional? And if elected, would you stand with the General Assembly and make an immediate motion to repeal the NDAA?
That happens to be something I talk about quite a bit, so I'll go ahead and take that first. Yes, it is unconstitutional, and you just said why. It violates our 4th, 5th, and 6th Amendment rights. How many people here do not know what the NDAA is? National Defense Authorization Act, which Obama signed into law last December. And we recently, in fact it was last week, there was a vote held, the Smith-Amash Amendment, which would have removed from that bill the provisions that allow for American citizens to be illegally detained with no due process of law. So Mr. Cantor and Mr. Forbes both had a chance to right their wrong. And you know what? They squashed the amendment. They kept the bill as is. Now, what the NDAA says can happen is, if our Department of Homeland Security or any federal law enforcement decides that you are a potential terrorist, a potential threat to this country, key word here, potential, American citizen or not, you can be detained by our government indefinitely, no due process. You cannot confront your accusers, you cannot speak with an attorney, you will not see your family, and you will not have a speedy trial by a jury of your peers. What country does that sound like to you? It's not the United States of America. Now, a lot of people look at me and they say, and folks, I'm going to hurt some feelings, get ready. A lot of people in the Republican Party go, well gosh, Floyd, that's just about terrorists. We're not terrorists. It's okay if we violate the Constitution if it's for our safety, isn't it? Folks, how many people here are actually members of the Richmond Tea Party? Raise your hand. How many of you here own guns? How many of you here have written to one of your representatives about limited government and the Constitution? Guess what, folks? You're all potential terrorists. Now, if you think I'm crazy and I'm making this up, look it up. Department of Homeland Security over a year ago sent out a list of things that law enforcement should look for in determining if an individual is a potential terrorist. And everything I just mentioned puts you on that list. So if you think this doesn't apply to you, you better think again. And Mr. Cantor voted for this bill. And a federal judge just recently declared it unconstitutional. Glenn Beck, Rush Limbaugh, Judge Anthony Napolitano all say it's unconstitutional. So if I'm crazy, then I'm in pretty good company. And I'll live with that. And I'll tell you something else before I turn it over to Bonnie. How many people in here are veterans? Thank you. Did you know that a returning combat veteran is on that list? Folks, if that doesn't make you mad, nothing will. And that pisses me off. And it should you. Go ahead.
Well, I'm glad to know I'm in such good company. I'll answer the question that you posed, Floyd. What country does that sound like? Well, it sounds a lot like the United States of China to me. Because suspension of habeas corpus, and that is what we are talking about, suspension of those rights is exactly the tool that countries like China, like Iran, like Syria, like North Korea, and all totalitarian states use when they cite national security as their reason to bully their citizens and get those who are pesky and in the way out of the way. That's exactly what they use. They throw you in jail and you don't see the light of day until or if they decide that you are no longer a threat. In China, they send you out to Gansu province, where they let you languish in a prison on the outskirts of Beijing, and you just sit there with no trial, with no one covering your story. And every time, you remember this dissident who just came, the blind fellow. Well, why did he have to leave China? Because they use a law, they use a system, and they use a procedure which mirrors what we have just signed into law. And so the answer to the question is, yes, I will stand with the General Assembly and do everything in my power to repeal a totalitarian law such as we have signed.
And I can tell you that Karen Pikowski feels the same way, and I can tell you that Ken Vaughn feels the same way. So you've got 4 congressional choices this year, all of whom recognize and understand that our constitutional rights are being violated, not just by Democrats in the Obama administration, but by fellow Republicans. So we better wake up, people. We better get our head out of the sand and recognize that the problem is not just Democrats.
I want to say one more thing about this as well. This kind of law is enacted when countries feel domestically weak and do not feel strong enough to be able to identify and secure the real terrorists in their system and in their country. Security services in our country, intelligence agencies, pardon the misnomer, that do not coordinate with one another, leading to failures of intelligence and failures such as we had prior to 9/11, that do not coordinate, that live in a culture of rivalry rather than cooperation. This weakens our security and our intelligence agencies and ability in this country. And in the wake of that and in the vacuum that that leaves, we then get laws like this. Laws like that don't strengthen our country. The freedom that we have in the Bill of Rights, those freedoms are what strengthen our country. Thanks.
Thank you. Next, I'd like to take a question from the floor. Man in the back.
Yes, ma'am. This question is for Bonnie. Why did you choose not to run in your own district against Bobby Scott, most of one of those liberal members of Congress, instead decided to run in the district you don't live in against Randy Forbes?
I lived in the district when I decided to run. I lived in the district when it was time to announce on January 1st. I lived in the district until I filed my candidacy statement. I lived in the district for the entire period of my petitioning, and I lived in the district when Randy Forbes and I simultaneously filed our petitions and our statement of candidacy and our filing fee with the chairman of the 4th District Republican Committee on March 12th. I lived in the district until I was redistricted on March 14th, when the Department of Justice decided that they would accept Virginia's redistricting plan. And I will also remind you that acceptance of that plan was by no means a sure thing, so much so that if you look at HB 1151 and 2 other bills that were put before the General Assembly allowing us to get our petitions signed under the old districts, encouraging us to get signatures, in my case from Petersburg, because there was no certainty on the part of the Assembly, no certainty, even up to and including the governor's office, with whom I spoke many times, that justice would approve Virginia's redistricting plan for the congressional districts. They were so worried that it wouldn't that they made special provisions to allow the old districts to be used for petitioning and to potentially make room for a new primary to be held in August if the districting didn't go through. So I lived in the 4th District.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, now next I'd like to do another question that was an internet submission from one of the supporters. This question is for both of you. One of the fundamental threats to a sustainable U.S. economy is continued funding and expansion of entitlement spending. Will you take steps to drastically reduce or do away with so-called entitlements such as welfare, unemployment, food stamps, and the like?
You want me to go first?
Sure.
Absolutely. Because just as in every federal program, including the defense budget, there is waste and there is fraud. First, we have to get out the waste. We have to get out the fraud. We can't become a nation that doesn't take care of people who are in immediate need, and without that need, without a bit of care, without a safety net, they're going to go straight to the bottom. But these programs were never intended to become a lifestyle. And unfortunately, for many, they have become a lifestyle. And it is a lifestyle which does not help them, and it does not help us, and it does not grow America as a healthy, dynamic society. I can speak to my own experience. Sorry, folks, I'm going to go back to the China thing. I lived in China when it was cradle to grave communism. You were born, the state took care of you, you died, they even buried you. You had to do nothing. You just had to show up, and you would get your stipend, you'd get your rice ticket, everything was done for you, and there was about as much motivation and incentive to be creative, to grow your own resources, to create a viable family, to go to a job, to learn, to study, as many people in this country feel when they get a paycheck that they are not working for. I believe that we have to reduce this because, number one, it's a drain on us. I was raised by my grandparents, as mentioned in my bio. Look, I'm not as old as this is going to make me sound, but they were born in the 1890s. When they were born and until their teens, there wasn't even an income tax in this country, and there certainly wasn't Social Security. They never had the concept of depending on Social Security. We have to do something about a mindset and a culture that creates an environment where we don't take care of ourselves anymore. People out there, there are some people who need help. We're not the kind of people to let them go. But we are the kind of people, I believe, in this country who recognize the difference between unnecessary dependence and tough love. Thank you.
Thanks.
I think another way of putting it is the safety net has become a hammock. And unfortunately it's true. I've seen it all too often. My family and I used to own 3 supermarkets in Richmond, so I can tell you where a lot of your tax dollars are going and how they're being used. Folks, it gets back to answer simply, yes, I would work to get rid of them. Let me make 2 points. First, when we talk about entitlement spending, I don't lump Social Security in with that, and I'll tell you why. Because you paid into it. Welfare, as we think of it, is getting money that you haven't earned from somebody who has. Now, do I believe Social Security should exist? Constitutionally, no. But it does. So, should those who have paid into it receive the benefits they were promised? Yes, they should. And there are ways we can make sure that it remains solvent until we can wean ourselves off of it. In the meantime, 17 enumerated powers are given to the federal government in the U.S. Constitution. That's all, 17. Anything not specifically spelled out in this document for the federal government is reserved to who? States. The states or the people. Social welfare, corporate welfare are not in here. That is not what our tax dollars should be spent on. And when I talk about welfare, I'm not just talking about the food stamps and the WIC vouchers and AFDC. I'm talking about corporate welfare as well, bailing out businesses in the private sector using your tax money and mine. It's welfare no matter who's getting it. It's unconstitutional, it's wrong, and I'll do everything I can to get rid of it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
For next question, I'd like to entertain another question from the floor. Anyone have any questions on the floor? You, sir.
Hi.
Yes.
I was looking on the internet, and in Powhatan today, Wednesday, March the 9th, 2012, Emily Darrell, a staff wife, wrote this about you. Gerard, who calls herself a moderate, though very fiscally conservative Republican, made her third trip to Powhatan last week, what do you think, how you know, moderate Republican?
Because I'm fiscally conservative, extraordinarily strong, probably to the right of Randy Forbes on national security and defense. But I don't want to tell people how to live their personal lives any more than I want people to tell me how to live my personal life. And what that means is, on social issues, and this is where I may differ from some of you or perhaps agree with others, but on that whole bowl of what we now term as social issues, I do not feel that it is my personal right, and certainly not my right as a congresswoman, to tell a person how to personally live their life as long as they are not harming other people. And the only word that I can come up with for that position is moderate. That seems to be, I had someone suggest to me, perhaps you should say you're a progressive Republican. I said, oh no, I better not say that. I just think that there are a lot of issues, and we talked about some of these issues the other day when we were at the Republican Liberty Caucus Convention. I think a lot of these issues are the ones that we all know. I just don't think, first of all, I'll be very honest with you. All of you look old enough to understand what I'm talking about when I say, I just don't think we can legislate personal behavior. Even if things are illegal, people are going to do them if they really like doing them. I can't put it any plainer than that. And that is where I am, for lack of a better word, and I would entertain a suggestion for a better word, moderate.
Oh, when I think of moderate Republican, I think of Rhino.
I hope not. For all
Well,
the
that's
checks,
what I think is moderate.
for all the checks that I've written to the Republican Party over the last 12 years, I hope that's not true. No, that is not true. I'm a dedicated Republican, absolutely dedicated and passionate Republican. I believe in the Republican creed, but I want to stay out of personal lives because I know that I'll be thrown out even if I try to get into them. That's how I see our government's role and what it should be. Let's go back to the Constitution. Deal with the matters of government. Thanks. Thanks for a good question.
I like what you said, or what you say, but when you say you were interested in bringing businesses back into the city, isn't this a federal office that you're interested in?
Absolutely.
How does the federal government enter into the local economy by bringing businesses into the area?
It's called
Also,
clout.
what would you
Sorry.
specifically say that you would do to encourage me, if I'm some other business, to come to Richmond and be in your district? Would you give me an incentive? Or what would you do to make me want to come
Charm you.
to Richmond?
It comes down to, we are in an economic emergency in this country. And I believe that it is all hands on deck. I don't believe in job descriptions anymore. I don't believe that just because it says legislator on the door of a congressperson, that that is the only job that they should be doing. They are there to work for their district and for the health and welfare and progress of their district.
What would you do?
Number one.
How would you get them interested in coming?
Okay,
There must be something specifically that you had in mind.
absolutely.
What is it?
I will have at least one, if not two staff members who are specifically dedicated to business and economic development, attraction, and promotion. That's what my office will have. I know how this works. I've been involved in this on the other side for 25 years. I know what companies are looking for when they want to invest. I've worked with CEOs and boards of directors for the last 20-some years in helping them to find places that they want to invest, and I know what they're looking for. I don't want to waste that opportunity. And I know, and we all know if we think about it, the office of Congress carries a lot of weight. There's a lot of leverage. There's a lot of clout. Let me give you a specific example. In Washington, D.C., right down the road from the Capitol is Massachusetts Avenue. What's on Massachusetts Avenue? Embassies. What do all embassies from other countries have? Offices of commercial development. What do they represent? They represent companies in their countries who want a foothold in the United States. What do they want to do? They want to sell here. Well, I have a better idea. Make it here and we'll buy it.
Well, I mean, now, as I understand it, companies want to have an incentive, like a tax incentive. Would you be encouraging a tax incentive for the city of Richmond in order to bring me down to Richmond?
The only incentive which a company should get to come to any area is an incentive which costs far, far less than the proven projected economic benefit which that company is going to bring over, not the long term, because they'll always try to fool you with the long term. 10 years down the road, this is how much money we're going to make for you. Never listen to those figures. They've got to be able to show you an immediate economic benefit, and if you give them a little something to sweeten the pot, and you can afford it, that's not a bad thing. It's a negotiation after all. What do we want? We want practical business principles to bring businesses here that we want. And that's negotiation. But I tell you what, it's not up to me whether to give the incentive or not. I'm the broker. I'm the person who goes out and finds these companies who want to sell to the U.S. This is just one way of doing it. They want to sell a Belgian company that makes wonderful chocolate, and they make wonderful chocolate in Belgium. Do you really think they're going to air freight it over here? Are they going to put it in a container? I don't think so. It's not going to look very good when it gets here. So, why don't they do like Swedish Match did? Bring it here and make it here. That's what we want. We want the reverse of what China did. Why do you think we're in so much trouble with China? How do you think we lost our jobs? We lost our jobs because the Chinese, who have one of the most unattractive investment environments in the world, were nonetheless able to entice us to invest there because they have cheap labor that they control, and they have 1.3 billion people, and we're going to sell to each and every one of them and all become multimillionaires.
I'm not sure whether you've said you are in favor of an incentive or not in favor of a dollar incentive.
Only if it costs much, much less than the proven immediate economic benefit to the area in which the investment will be made.
So you are.
If necessary, come on, in a commercial deal, of course you do. I'll give you this $20,000, but you're going to have a benefit to my area of $2 million. You're going to bring 200 jobs. You always, if you need to, you give a little bit, just a little bit, to make the people feel good. But you never, ever believe those long-range numbers. And yes, if you're trying to pin me down on that, absolutely, because that's business. That's business. And if we're going to be a successful and economically dynamic country again, and we're not bad now, folks, it's not as bad as, it's not that bad, but if we're going to be, we have to apply business principles to the way we run our country. But thank you for the question.
Lisa was next.
Oh. This is for Bonnie also.
Poor Floyd.
I know, that's what I was waiting for somebody to ask. Did anybody have a question for Floyd?
Or was it just district?
And I want to tell both of you that I now have a long list of questions for Forbes and Ken on the back of my page here. I noticed on your Facebook page that you openly thank Obama and DNC supporters supporting you and volunteering for your campaign. And you have openly thanked these people and discussed this on your Facebook page, specifically Randy Williams, who is a known supporter of Obama and a DNC volunteer.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
I did not know that.
I was just wondering why.
Because I have met his father, and his father is definitely not a DNC supporter.
Yeah, he's a...
I have met his father, who is a retired military veteran, and he's 80 years old.
Yeah, Randy's not his father, though.
I want you to understand something. I have met his father. His father is a retired veteran, 80 years old, very proud to talk about the service that he's given. I've never met Randy Williams. Randy Williams likes what I say. I had no idea that he's involved with the DNC. Maybe you'd like to show me some proof of that. I have no idea that he is.
I'll gather it up and email it to you.
Okay, I'll be happy to see that. But one thing I do know, because of him, I've got a lot of signs in a certain part of Chesapeake, and that's not a bad thing.
Yeah,
That's not a bad thing.
He's pulling in other DNC and Obama supporters.
What do you think? Well, all right. Did you have any other people you wanted to mention?
No, just Randy.
Okay. Well, I don't know that. I never knew that about him. Everything that he has said to me privately in messages does not indicate that, so I'm very surprised to hear it.
Well, let me ask you, does it really matter if someone supports President Obama and turns around and support you, because that means they'll enjoy what you're saying? And my other statement, Floyd, you mentioned corporate Republican creed, but hasn't the Republican creed been replaced with Republican greed? And that is why things cannot get done. Bonnie, you also mentioned that term limits. But wouldn't that lead to the same thing? Because what would happen, you would have people grooming someone, and I seen this when I lived in Cleveland, grooming another person to take their place where they still have the same supporters, but they're sitting on the corporate board. So it's just an unending cycle. So I think back to your question with the judgment, Randy, I think it's nice when a person absolutely look at what a person stands for and say, I may like a portion of this, but I want this. I remember Sheila Johnson Newman, a staunch Democrat, when she came out and supported Governor Bob McDonnell. She taken a lot of hit from the Democrats, but she did not go with creed because she looked at what McDonnell stood for when it came to jobs, what she assumed he stood for. And I just think it's a great thing when you have people that read and listen. And they're not beholden to a party just because of the party. They're beholden to the Constitution. They're beholden to standards. They're beholden to and looking forward to a future in this state.
I want to say the one thing. I love what you said. Obviously, I like what you said very much. And I think we have to get back to one thing. And this is partially something I learned coming back from overseas. The first thing that I see when I look out at this room or any room, the first thing I see are Americans. I see Americans. I don't see Republican and Democrat or any other party. I see people who all agree with me on one thing, even if this room was half Democrat. We all agree on a few basic things. Freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of the press, freedom to vote, and freedom of assembly. You find me somebody in America who doesn't believe in those 5 things, and I'll say they're not an American. Every Democrat and every Republican believes in those core values. And you know, let's go back to Randy Williams. He's offered to do a Christian concert for me down in Chesapeake. So whether he's a Democrat, a DNC member, or maybe I've just convinced him to be a Republican, who knows?
That's perfect.
I think it's a pretty nice thing that he's offered to do that for me.
I just want to remind everyone the value of brevity. So if we get more short questions and short responses, we get more questions in, longer questions and
Just
longer
one thing
responses.
she said though, Republican greed. I got news for you. There's greed on both sides of the aisle.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And those are the people we need to be conscious of. I don't look, it should be obvious to anybody by now, I don't cut the Republicans any slack any more than I do the Democrats. If you're messing up, you need to be held accountable. And the thing that gets me is when people talk about the greed and corporations on Wall Street, we need more regulations, all right? Well, who's going to enforce those regulations? Politicians? Aren't they the same people that got us in this mess in the first place?
Yep.
So do we really trust one group of greedy people to regulate another group of greedy people? When you consider that one group of greedy people are giving a lot of money to the other group of greedy people to kind of, you know, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, and let them get away with what they're doing. I think we need to find other ways of regulating that. It's called the legal system, and if somebody's doing something illegal, you prosecute them. You don't just, you know, give them a little slap on the wrist.
Another question, I see Gilbert
Yes.
trying to jump in here.
Bonnie, on those social issues you talked about,
No boy, here it comes.
I hate to come back to it because I think it's a big part of what I vote for. He talks about you don't think we should be in the lives of personal lives of people and tell them what to do. What we feel as Americans sometimes is that we feel other people's lifestyles are forced upon us. That in our culture, we say that when you say, well, I hope I can make this fast. With that we forcing ourselves on, forcing how to live, it should be in their personal lives. But it doesn't hurt anybody. Well, what about if it hurts our culture down the road of destroying our moral and cultural values that we so much treasure in America? How are we going to raise our kids? But if the culture is forcing us to raise our kids in such a way that we don't want to, then I think that's bad when the social issues try to force us to allow our kids to just have a different lifestyle. You have any thoughts on that? I hope I made myself.
And that is the role of society, churches, communities, and other groups of people
But if the government forces
to define and decide what the culture is in which we live. I do not think it is the role of government to decide what our culture is. It is the role of government to provide what's in the Constitution, and I do not see a Ministry of Culture in there.
Yeah, but if the culture is forcing us to have certain lifestyles come within our community, come within our schools, to teach our kids different values.
This is
The
where we
values
have,
that we don't want. That's coming from the government. That's not coming from the church. It's coming from the government saying you have to do this. You have to have this curriculum to teach your kids. And we say we don't want this curriculum.
this is why we have school choice. This is why we have the choice. I'm a huge fan of the idea of personal responsibility, and I personally believe that we have a great deal more ability to control our lives than maybe what some of us actually decide to use. Like, you know, we all hear the saying that we don't use more than 10% of our brain power. Well, I think sometimes we don't use more than 10% of our responsibility power, of our individual power. But I understand your point, and I thank you for the question.
Let me ask you this. Is there anything that you think the government does well?
We have some also soldiers. They train our soldiers with.
The soldiers. The government doesn't train the soldiers. The military trains the soldiers.
Well, who's in charge of the military?
The civilian government is in charge of it, but the civilian government doesn't train them. There's a distinct difference. The military is an entirely different culture. We need to remember that. My point being, do you really want the government determining for us what is and is not culturally acceptable? Really?
No, I want we the people to. I just
Exactly.
want to shut them up.
And I agree with you. And I'll say this. The government, no one has special rights. All right, I'm going to regret I ever said this. I know that gay marriage has been much in the news lately. Gay people do not have any special rights. They have the same rights you and I do. No more, no less. So what I understand coming from you is that we shouldn't allow various groups or segments of society to have rights that others don't have. Is that right?
The marriage rights.
And so I'm with Bonnie in the sense that when it comes to the morality and the mores under which we live, I would rather that the churches, the families, the communities make that determination rather than some law passed by the government or some government bureaucracy that determines who's going to be forced to do something they don't want to. The Catholic Church recently was told when it came to contraception that they were going to have to offer contraception to their parishioners. Well, that's not the government's decision to make. That should be for the Catholic Church to decide.
Well, that's fine, but as an African American, when I was growing up as African American, the churches taught fairness. I didn't get fairness from the government. Churches taught morality. I didn't get morality from the government as an African American. I'm just saying, the government has to do so. The government has to step in and do something too to line up the church.
The government enforces laws so that if somebody is doing something that harms another, then they should be held accountable. Well, they should. I mean, look, I hear you. There's no perfect.
Are we saying that abortion shouldn't be regulated in some way by the government? The government has no involvement in passing laws that impact us culturally. And I want to really address a question of Bonnie, because I'm confused now. I mean, you took a...
My husband's confused too, so
you took a libertarian position.
Yeah.
That regarding morality, et cetera.
And
are you really saying that you're pro-choice, pro-gay marriage, and those things? Well, clarify that.
Please,
because
I'm glad you asked me
you're running
specifically.
against a guy who is right down the line as far as pro-life, marriage between a man and a woman, et cetera, and very much supportive of traditional moral codes. So, can you just tell us how you differ from him?
Here's the thing, and I know something about abortion because I've seen factory abortion.
Yeah.
Okay? But here's the thing, it goes back to this, and I will say this to you as a woman. I will say this to you as a woman who grew up before Roe versus Wade. I know that if we don't have that law, women and girls will get abortions anyway. And I know that we will start sending women back to the butchers. We start killing them, we start maiming them, we start sending them into unsanitary, unmedical conditions where they will not be able to have children again.
That's a very standard argument.
Well, I think it's a very valid argument.
And we could take an hour, debating that.
Okay, so you asked me my position.
Let's not do that. I just want to know what your position is.
My position is
so you're pro-choice. Okay, that's all.
I agree with Laura Bush. I would never change that law. I agree with Laura Bush. I would never change that law.
And you're pro same-sex marriage?
No, I'm not.
You're not?
No. I think that's up to the partners. That's not up to me. It has nothing to do
as far as
with
the law
me.
is concerned. As far as the legal definition of marriage is concerned.
Let's go. Well, am I going to be allowed to answer? Or are we going to?
Well,
may I answer?
Well, we want to keep it short. Yes. No.
Just a time check. We're less than 25 minutes now. In order to give you closing time.
I don't think Virginia is ready for. I don't think my district is that the majority of people are ready for same-sex marriage. But I absolutely believe in civil unions, and the reason I do is, I think that when we're born, we don't choose who we're going to love. We don't choose that. That happens to us as we, let me finish, please. That happens to us as we grow up. And I never want to see another situation where I know a gay couple, one of them goes to the hospital and the other can't visit because he is not family and they have been together for 25 years. That is a travesty of morality as far as I'm concerned, and I'll stand by that position.
I choose not to love another man's wife. That's what I'm talking about. You can't choose your love, but I can't choose to love another man's wife. You can't choose that.
Next question, I want to take Joe in the back. He's been waiting. I'm going to try to get to everybody. Everybody has their hand up. I'm going to try to get everybody if we can.
I have a one-word question. It probably has a two-word answer. Obamacare, repeal it. But I'd like a little more discussion on this. And to this point, I think most people in this room are against Obamacare. And if you get in, if either of you get elected, you're going to be working with not only the House, but the Senate. There's a good chance that the Senate is going to be taken over by the Republicans, but they might only get 51 seats, which means that they still won't have enough to end the filibuster if a repeal law were to get over to the Senate. So, in my estimation, there are, short of repealing the whole thing, which is what I would be in favor of, there are other approaches, such as repealing parts of it. What parts of Obamacare would you support repealing pragmatically that you think might be able to get through with Congress? Floyd?
Individual mandate. I don't think the government has the right to tell anybody what they have to buy and punish them if they don't. And I would, just to make it clear, I would abolish Obamacare altogether and replace it with the Jeffersonian health plan of Dr. John Lanzalotti, which, by the way, has just recently been patented. And it's on my website under my issues page. I would encourage you to check it out.
Brian, do you want to answer that as well?
Absolutely the same in terms of what I would repeal, the individual mandate. Absolutely. If I had to choose one, that has to go.
All right, I want to go to the gentleman in the red shirt in the back.
Well, unlike hopefully Cuccinelli's lawsuit will pass through the Supreme Court, we don't have to worry about repealing it. But anyway, this goes for Floyd Moore, Bonnie, more than welcome to answer. Getting in, for you want to be in education, what is your view on the U.S. Department of Education and its big bureaucracy, and do you feel it is that it is constitutional for that department to be around, and does the federal government have a place in our local education systems?
The Department of Education at the federal level is not constitutional, period. Now, let's just assume for the sake of this argument that it was a blazing success. Test scores were up, kids were learning, 99% graduation rate. It's still unconstitutional. But that's not what we have to concern ourselves with, is it? Because we know it's an abysmal failure. That test scores nationwide have done nothing but plummet since the inception of the Federal Department of Education. How did we educate kids before we had a National Department of Education? How did we get the brilliant people that we had? George Washington Carver, W.E.B. Du Bois, Thomas Jefferson, James Madison. Go back through the history of this country and the brilliant men that we've produced. And you know what they didn't have? They didn't have a Federal Department of Education. And they didn't have computers that they could take home every night from school. And these men were brilliant. I bring up the computer thing because my wife's recently been saddled with having to bring home a laptop. And now every kid's supposed to have a laptop because they can't possibly learn without their own computer. Really? Now, if you want to learn how to use a computer, you need a computer. But if you want to learn how to read, if you want to learn how to do math, if you want to learn science, do you really need a computer that you can take home every night? No. So I would return that responsibility where it belongs, back to the states and the localities, where the parents and the local school boards will hold sway, where they don't have to beg for money from Washington, D.C. to get anything done, and where Washington, D.C. isn't pulling strings. Well, we gave you $300,000 last quarter, so you've got to install this into your curriculum. No, we need to get rid of it.
This gentleman here in the front.
I think a lot of us have heard candidates or elected officials, public office, they will say very often, this is my personal opinion about something. I guess to pontificate for a second, it's when you get elected to that office, it is not a personal opinion. It is a way you vote, and it is the opinion of the office. So with that in mind, I guess there's a couple of issues that I'd like either a yes or no answer for, for energy. Would both of you vote for offshore drilling, or would you vote to utilize uranium? On the social issues, yes or no, would you vote to institute gay marriage federally? Would you vote to protect, would you vote for civil unions, yes or no? Would you vote to...
I can't keep up.
Yeah.
Can we just inform the
but basically, and
start back with the first one.
So I would say offshore drilling.
Yes.
Yes.
Gay marriage, yes or no?
No, it's not the federal government's responsibility to decide who gets married to who.
Drug legalization.
I think we need to revisit that subject. I think we need to, at the very least, look at decriminalizing some drugs.
Is there a limit to that? Or?
Probably, yeah. I think we need to look at some of the harder stuff like crack or methamphetamine. We probably want to take a different approach. But something like marijuana, I just have a problem with the fact that somebody pulled over in a traffic stop with a with a single marijuana cigarette in the car can be sent to prison for 5 years. Where a guy who's pulled over drunk on Jack Daniels or something might get 6 months. If you're impaired, you're impaired. Why does one get 5 years, one gets 6 months? If you're in a car and you're impaired, you're a threat to my safety. I don't care what you're impaired on. Now, if you're at home in the privacy of your own home, have at it. I really don't care. I'm not going to advocate that the police go peeking in windows to see who might be smoking a blunt. Okay?
Yep.
So that's where I come down on the drug issue.
Would you vote any additional or to repeal certain restrictions on abortion federally?
On abortion federally, I would rather see that left at the state level.
Second.
So Bonnie?
Hmm?
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Did you ask me?
Oh yeah, would you, that I was asking, the same question I asked Floyd, would you vote any additional restrictions or would you vote to repeal further restrictions on abortion at the federal level?
If the federal law was, probably it should be handled by the states. Currently, there's a federal law to allow it. I would like to keep a law to allow it because I know what happens when you don't. But someplace there has to be. And it's the sad, I want to say this, I hate abortion. I would encourage any woman to never get an abortion. I understand what the ramifications of getting an abortion can be for a woman for the rest of her life. For the rest of her life. And I would urge any moral, religious, or spiritual argument with practical help to stop a woman from getting an abortion, because half the time they're girls and they don't know how it's going to make them feel for the next 60 years of their lives. But I also know that she's going to get it, whether we give her the law or not. So.
Right, so
I would not let tax dollars be used to fund abortions, either here or abroad. Again, that's not the federal government's responsibility using our tax dollars.
we're getting really short on time now. I think I saw it. Was there another question? Was there another hand in the back?
By the way,
no other questions in the back. Sir?
Yeah, on this abortion issue, it's real nice of you to say that,
I'm sorry, let me just jump in. Let's please be brief because we're really running out of time. I mean,
should I stop now?
No, that's okay.
On the abortion issue, it's flat out murder. I can't see how you can say that because a woman's going to get it, yes, she's going to get it, but if you discourage it, there's going to be less abortions. It's real simple. So I don't see how there could be any objection to doing away with abortions.
I think
any questions?
Is that a question? Do you want me to
Yeah,
respond?
I don't see how you justify it. You get up there and say, well, this is Bill Clinton all over again. I want every child, it should be safe, abortion should be safe, yada, yada. The fact is, abortion is murder, okay? End of the story. How can you possibly take the position that it's something that it should be left up to the states or anybody else there? Or because I wish it not to take place? Or because they're going to get it? Yeah, let them go back to the back alleys. There'll be far less abortions when that happens.
Actually, statistics show otherwise. It'd be very interesting. Hang on, let me answer your question, please. It would be very interesting if you go look at the statistics of probable abortions and actual abortions that happened in this country before there was a law one way or the other regulating it. And again, I go back to my dear grandparents. There was no law regulating abortion. It happened. Everybody knew Aunt Sally's cabin. And everybody in this room knows that.
Except it's millions now.
It's a huge industry. Planned Parenthood, I mean, again, it's become the ultimate birth control, abortion on demand. And it just, I think, fallacious thinking, I'm sorry.
The question here in the front?
Question for Mr. Bain.
Yes, sir.
How would you handle this situation when a majority of people in the country don't care about the Constitution because they have not been educated that is one of the most wonderful documents in the world? And a law is passed, and the majority of people, which we have lots of times, don't care. Even though you and I and other people say, look, this is not constitutional. The people who are the policemen of whether it's a law, or whether it's correct or not, according to the Constitution, don't care. So the law is passed as unconstitutional. The majority of people say it is when it really isn't, how would you handle something like that?
I've used the bully pulpit of my office to try to educate them. Look, there was a time in this country when the Dred Scott law was in effect, and the majority of people thought a black man was chattel and wasn't allowed to be free. Did that make it right?
During Prohibition, for example, they made a law, and nobody abided by it.
Right. Prohibition.
So what happens after?
We abolished the amendment. People came to realize it was a waste of time. And that gets back to the same thing with the drug argument. We've got laws against all kinds of drug use now, and the numbers keep going up.
So you would go to bully pulpit.
Well, what else could I do? I mean, I certainly couldn't twist their arm behind their back, but, you know, I would take advantage of every opportunity I have to educate people. And this very process of running for office is an educational experience. I mean, how many people before the last week or so knew that we were having a primary June 12th? There's still a lot of people out there that don't know that. How many people, and I'll get more into this in my closing statements, but how many people do you think understand Eric Cantor's voting record? If I wasn't making the noise that I'm making and pointing these things out, there are people out here who just happily go about their business, ignorant about what's going on and not care. So there's no easy answer. I mean, look, I wish June 12, I win the primary, November 6, I'm elected to Congress, and January of next year I'm sworn into office and I wave a magic wand and everything's wonderful. I wish it was that easy. It's not. And I'm not going to be able to do anything by myself. I'm certainly going to need help and hope that there are other people up there who think the same way I do. But you know what? The journey of 1,000 miles begins with the first step. And if I don't take that first step, nothing's going to change.
I think with 47 million people on food stamps, they're not going to vote to not have food stamps.
But if they have jobs, then maybe they won't need the food stamps. See, again, there's no one law that can be passed or one law that can be repealed that's going to fix all this. It's a multi-pronged attack, to use a military analogy. One guy's hitting him on the left flank while the other guy's hitting him in the rear. You can't just do it with a frontal assault. You've got to do a lot of different things. Create more jobs, you create less dependency on the government because people can work. And you know what? If they can work and they don't, and jobs are out there, shame on them. We're the most charitable country on the face of the planet. Americans are the most philanthropic people in the world. No one is ever going to convince me that without some government program to keep people from dying in the streets, that we're just going to have people curled up in corners dying all over the place, starving to death. We're not going to let that happen. But we don't have to have a federal program to do that for us because it's not in this document here.
Unfortunately, we've consumed, I think, all of our time for questions tonight. I apologize. We're about to run long. I'd like to reserve these last 10 minutes for closing comments from the candidates. So Floyd, if you'd like to, well, actually, let's go to Bonnie first.
Ladies first.
Absolutely.
I'd like to say this. From 1987 to 2001, I lived in a country where I had a gag order. I couldn't talk about any of the issues that we've talked about here tonight. You couldn't have asked me the questions you've asked me. I couldn't have given the answers I've given. I couldn't write to a newspaper. I couldn't go to a journalist. I couldn't even go to a foreign journalist because if my name had been printed, it didn't really matter that it would have compromised me. I had a passport. I could leave at any time. But my Chinese colleagues and my Chinese friends, they couldn't leave. And their association with me would have meant absolutely, and in one case absolutely did mean, that they would go to jail. Tonight we have exercised the most basic and the most treasure-filled rights of Americans. We have engaged in free speech, and I thank you for the opportunity.
That's it? Well, you're never going to make it in politics. Okay. First, before we move on, I've got my campaign manager will smack me in the head if I don't tell you. Back here on the table are my business cards with all my contact information, including my website, which I would encourage you to pick up. I've also got 2 legal pads back there with pens. If you would like to help my campaign in any way, making phone calls, putting signs up, whatever the case may be, please give us your name and any contact information you're willing for us to have so we can get in touch with you. And remember, June 12th, staple it on the wall, write it on your forehead, whatever it takes. Tell your friends, neighbors, family, anybody. June 12th, you've got to get out and vote. This is too important to put it off. It's too important to ignore it. We've got to do it. Now, I mentioned earlier in my statements why I'm running. I'm challenging the House Republican leader, Eric Cantor. Man raises a lot of money. Man's been there for 12 years. He has accrued power and influence, to which I would ask, how has that benefited us? But that's the argument you hear. Well, you're running against Eric Cantor. I like Eric Cantor. I mean, he's got lots of power now. He's got influence. Doesn't seem to be doing much for us with it. Just recently, he's touting his 20% tax cut for businesses. You've all heard that? You probably got the mailers. How many of you in here own a business? Or have ever owned a business? Let me ask you this. 20% for 1 year. You going to invest more capital? Going to grow your business, hire new people? Smoke and mirrors, folks. Smoke and mirrors. It's an election year. He's got a challenger in the primary for the first time. He's got to say something to make you think he cares. Why for 1 year? In 1 year, it's going to have to be reauthorized. What if it's not reauthorized and you just invested several $1,000s worth of capital in your business? Up in smoke. We've got to see through this stuff, folks. We've got to stop accepting that when the Democrats do it, we're self-righteously up in arms and beating their chest. Those evil Democrats, how dare they? But when one of our guys does it, it's okay. No, it's not. It's not okay. It's not okay when you have a voting record that says it's okay to arrest and detain indefinitely American citizens. I don't care if you're a Democrat, Republican, Libertarian, I don't care who you are. If you voted for a bill like that, you said to me that you don't give a rip about the Constitution. You don't care about our individual civil liberties. We have a Republican creed we work by. We're supposed to adhere to it, just as we are supposed to adhere to our oath to uphold and defend the Constitution. One of the things in the creed says that the free enterprise system is the most productive supplier of human needs and economic justice. I like those words. They're good words. I wish my representative governed according to these words. Why do we have both parties continuing to tinker with the economy? All those Democrats had a bill last week, stupid bill, bad bill. We've got a bill this week, but our bill's good bill. You know what the problem with all these bills is? The government is involved in the economy. Has the government ever done anything that helped the economy? Republican or Democrat? So why do we keep putting up with this? Why don't we let the free market? Anybody remember, I'm a historian, I'm going to throw history at you. The crash of 1920? I know you do, kid. We hear about the Great Depression, don't we? Do you realize in 1920 there was a depression coming on? It lasted about, what, 18 months? Maybe? Maybe not even that long. And it went away. Do you know why it just went away? Because the government stayed out of it and let the free market right itself. We have entrepreneurs in this country. There are people out here right now who want to start a business, and they can't, or they're afraid to. Anybody who wants to start a business now, aside from the insurance problems you have to go through, there's the government regulations, the taxes. You can't build a factory down the road that will employ 1,500 people making good salaries because a brown-nosed snail darter's migration pattern goes across that land. Well, you know what I'd say to that? You know, brown-nosed snail darter sucks to be you. Because if I've got a choice between disrupting his migration pattern or putting 1,500 Virginians to work, guess which choice I'm going to make? The snail darter can find a way around the factory. We also hear that fiscal responsibility and budgetary restraints must be exercised at all levels of government. Republican creed. Anybody happy with Obama's stimulus spending? Quantitative easing? How's that working out for us? Anybody heard of TARP? That's Obama's stimulus spending by another name. It's the government taking your tax dollars and giving it to a private sector business who obviously doesn't know how to do business very well. So instead of saying to them, you're just going to have to go through the bankruptcy procedure just like anybody else would have to do and come out on the other end and be more solvent, have a better business model in place, do a better job of running your business. No, no, no. We're going to give you money. It's not in the Constitution. It is not fiscally responsible, and it is not a budgetary restraint. It is a violation of the Republican creed. PEPFAR, President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief. How many people remember that one? Under George Bush. Kevin, we'll just stipulate that you know all this, okay?
Yeah. Just trying to get people.
I understand. That was $55 billion, folks. $55 billion of your tax money going to Africa to help fight AIDS over there. Now, we all agree AIDS is bad. People who have AIDS need help. Is that the government's responsibility, using our tax dollars in Africa? Or do you think maybe somebody like the Red Cross or Salvation Army, some charitable organization, could do that? That's what should be done. My opponent has raised the debt ceiling 8 times in his tenure. Budgetary restraints and fiscal responsibility. Folks, if you're living at home, you're paying your bills, and you find that you're getting more and more in debt, do you go out and open up another credit card? Or do you find a way to stop spending until you get your budget under control? We've got to say no. We've got to stop spending money that we don't have. And by the way, the last time he increased the debt ceiling was just last August, under the Obama administration. So when you hear Cantor and others railing against the evils of the Democrats and the Obama administration, you might ask him next time you get a chance, if you ever get a chance, well, why did you help him raise the debt ceiling? The federal government must preserve individual liberty by observing constitutional limitations. We've already spoken about the NDAA. How about Federal Restricted Buildings and Grounds Improvement Act? Do you know now it's a felony, not a misdemeanor, a felony, to protest at any event where the speaker is protected by the Secret Service? If the Secret Service decides they won't allow any protesting, any signs, it's a felony. Eric Cantor voted for that. There goes your First Amendment rights. We got spy planes, the drones, unmanned drones now flying overhead, Fourth Amendment right out the window. They can spy on you. CISPA, Cyber Intelligence Sharing and Protection Act. How many of you guys do blogs? Post on Facebook? Send emails to people? Well, now the government can spy on you. No probable cause, no Fourth Amendment rights. Mr. Cantor voted for that. So whenever you hear Mr. Cantor complaining about how bad the Obama administration is and how evil Democrats are and how restrictive they are of our civil liberties, and this is a short list, by the way. I just want you to know, this is just a few things I've picked out. There's a longer list of affronts to the Constitution that Mr. Cantor has voted for. I'm not making this stuff up. I'm going to tell you what I tell everybody. Look it up. Don't believe me if you don't want to. Do your research. Find it for yourself. It's out there. You just have to have the courage to believe the truth when you see it. Now, I'm running for Congress because I think we need to get more people up there who are willing to restore the concept of limited government under the Constitution. I need your help. I'm asking for your help. This is not going to be easy. I know who I'm up against. I know how much money he has to spend. So whatever you are willing to do to help me would be greatly appreciated. That's why we have the sign-up sheets back there. Tell your friends, tell your neighbors, tell anyone you talk to get out on June 12. Let's get rid of the career politicians. Let's get some common sense back in Washington, D.C. and I hope to have your vote on June 12th. Thanks so much.
Thank you. So on behalf of the Richmond Tea Party, I just want to say thank you all for coming out tonight and participating. I would like to say thank you to our panel members here, our two candidates that are running. Just want to personally say thank you for stepping up and running, because I know it's a great sacrifice. So.
Well, and thank you for having us. It means a lot to have this kind of forum where we can talk to people.
So I'd like another round of applause. Thank you. Thank you so much. Also, if you'd like to get involved in other election efforts, the Richmond Tea Party does have an elections committee. So if you want to get out there, get boots on the ground, and make a difference, please visit our website at richmondteaparty.com. You can help us make a difference. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
We are having Floyd, the guy who's running against George Allen speaking at breakfast.
Oh, really?
Jackson.
3 people. Oh,
yeah, he's coming. We've moved it to Finnegan's. I mean, Reagan's? No? What's the name of the restaurant out here? Keegan's. Keegan's on there. We're at the place for when they have change ownership. Nice to meet you. Also, we have
And I just have such disdain for men that have
many of jobs available in the chocolate factory for us.
I also had lend me your ears.
See, as a matter of fact, I know is African-American liaison person.
Yes.
But you know, now we're at I don't know about the size of my neighborhood, but I got and I'm going to make sure it's ready. Chance when you were speaking, I said that I did not know. I will. I should. Okay. But I was like, how do you transition to the
Thanks for coming.
Wars are symbolic. There's a lot of teachers.
And they literally started to
And whatever
But see, no, I think it is because I have started to do things like this, not via the media, but I mean, after social media connected with people. And I said, you know, I can because I had Georgia, I did. Georgia, you did. I did. But he was saying, Paul's calling them. And now it's speaking of that one that was sent to me. And you know, I have but I get it out here. But you know, it's so wonderful, even though and that's okay. So that's what I was going to ask you. I'm trying to transition over there.
everybody thanks the dedication.
What I learned and they then because I
with the brothers, I did, you could see an FBI in this room.
He has the red shirt.
I did do that. I did.
Bonnie, Teresa, smile.
I just love that you was close.
You want to take a picture of me and Bonnie?
Hopefully it turned out for me, look, I'm the worst picture taker in the world.
That's right, just don't cut her head off.
It's as bad as me. Good, ready to go? I think I did good.
Floyd's camera's back.
Okay. Camera's fine.
It sucks. On the American side.
But that one was nice.
I just sent you a friend request yesterday, so. I just sent you a friend request yesterday.
Well, hopefully.
My name is Igor.
Trying to say hello. Just trying to say hello.
And,
No!
oh, okay, yeah, I haven't checked it yet.
What is it again?
I mean, yeah,
I know you, I remember where you said she told me.
I really enjoyed it.
Thank you very, very much. So I did, thank you.
But did she come to, you know what? No. Keep it.
Yes, yes.
That's fair.
Okay.
Thank you. But you know, it's just sad that you're not getting the response. Wonderful.
He's small, but intimate.
He was over on Libby.
But yet, it's well, the thing is, and I remember what the Times Dispatch put out about what Alan gave Red Key and some other people. You know, it was vague. He doesn't want to.
Do you want some information?
You want to?
I know how fun so.
And that's all that is. It's just like you're not. You don't want to say to you.
Sure, I'll take it.
They close.
I don't think so. Okay. I don't think they still until 9.
You would not give them a call back. Last year, I did get a call. Last year, I did get a call. See, for the man,
Yes, I think it was really
what she used to do as a loving person, as a loving person, now she is her husband's business.
Yeah.
And what's the joke?
They are, and that's okay.
They are. And she was, you know, she was.
I really appreciate it. Thank you.
No, I didn't know that.
She was, as a matter of fact, man, back in time, she was the one that gave us these.
Thank you, I really, really appreciate it. You have to, you know, you do. Thank you.
But she was the one with the payroll.
Thank you.
And you're not a mess.
But she
Yeah, but there has to be another term there. Maybe it is, you know, the Republican Party office, maybe that was. I just want to get straight to it, you know.
Oh, it's okay about going up. I'm gonna take off.
Do you have a card? Do you have one of those cards?
Yeah, I'm gonna take my phone, I'm hoping that phone will get a call back, so I can tell you all how to get it for radio station, or for radio. Oh, she just did, she called me back. Let's say what she has to say, okay? So I can get you all the figures on radio.
Oh, she seems like stop action to me.
Great.
Owner of my company owns.
And are you faithful with Kobe Dillon as well?
I'm not, but
He's African American too. Hey, Chloe, the debate went well, but as you know, Forbes and Karen did not show up.
what a surprise.
Bonnie Gerard.
Okay.
Boy, did pretty
All right,
good,
great.
but,
And
Flo
do
wants
me
to
a
know
favor,
what
would
to
you
share.
share to talk to him? Me, because you got loads of friends, I know. Do you mind? And if you feel.
And Bonnie is for the
Did you?
fourth.
Good thing I had my hair done then.
Uh-huh.
I've got very.
I'm not always this way.
Okay.
Really?
Yeah, I'm usually.
Oh, at the beach?
I'll ask him. I'll ask him.
Sometimes I'll call yourself an educator. Yes,
Thank you.
Yes, I did say that.
Thank you.
Yeah, it
I
wasn't
mean, there
moderate.
has to be a term there somewhere.
It wasn't moderate.
Is there a term?
makes it easier.
I'll ask him, but, hold on,
Put you in a box. Instead of asking you questions, getting your answers. Now, look, let's face it, the abortion issue, I don't care what you say.
Absolutely.
I think it was a shame that it's a big issue. I was shocked. I was
Very, very much force. They were very big supporters, you know.
And whether Randy was Democrat or not, how is that, that's good, what's so bad about Democrats supporting Republicans? Ronald Reagan was Democrat. Right, he was a Republican. I mean, I don't know.
And by the way, did you know that Randy Forbes' first job was working for many years for a Democratic legislator? Did you know that?
I did not know that.
And one of the Scott Riddle.
He's a rhino.
Scott Riddle won the full ball.
I've had to go to the web, they called me the first go, we had to win the election.
He's a researcher extraordinaire.
Oh,
And
research. Did you have my card? I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's.
No, we're Facebook friends.
You've got mine?
I got it.
Please Facebook me, well, we're just going on the website and then Facebook me. Yeah, get in touch.
Yeah.
Stay in touch. Does Floyd have one? Yeah, sure.
I don't have as much time for research, so I'm working 3 jobs.
And if they don't.
First time running.
And there's nothing that first time.
Yes.
Oh my God. Me, I have.
You can have as many as you want.
There's been nothing.
I live, because I was redistricted.
Right.
Yeah, that happened on March 14th after the fire. And
I'm not trying to set you up.
No, I live 800 feet down from the 4th district line. I just have to cross the bridge. So I've made the pledge, and I hope you should set this, that when I'm doing the contract, I was.
God's name is killing, I can't think of his name.
They gave that to Bobby Scott, okay? So they made it a larger majority minority district. Larger, because it's already a majority minority district. They made it larger.
That's why we gerrymandered in 2000. Have you heard about this is not too big of a group, but Tri-Cities Liberty Alliance.
Hold on.
I might be able to help them with this. I think they
Do you know anybody? If you could maybe give him a shout and ask him to get in touch with me.
Yeah, I was just wondering if you knew, but they're Rumble Sport is big.
Yeah, I'd appreciate it if you would.
I mean, one Rumble Sport is like 100.
Yes. If you wouldn't mind doing that.
Yeah, I mean.
Well, you know, Floyd and I just spoke.
Yeah, I missed that. Yeah, I heard that was good.
I thought it was extraordinary. I thought it was great. It was a wonderful opportunity. They're great people, very good.
We showed up to the Republican convention. Oh, we showed up to the convention. I thought we showed up to Libby Market today for 4 hours. 4 hours, yeah, that's like Libby Market. Shocking.
Libby Market.
He's probably giving Diana
fruits and vegetables.
some retail therapy. Yeah, I don't know. It wasn't here.
So when I try to write.
That's wonderful.
Thank you very, very much.
Do you know Cynthia?
Cynthia, sure. Yes.
She used to take a ride with me.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, but she's big and
Yes, I haven't seen much of her recently, though. She was executive director of the chamber for a long time. Yeah, something happened. I don't know what, and I didn't ask. But, you know, she's a wonderful, dynamic, inspirational woman. Okay. Yeah. I thought she did a good job, but, you know, I try not to get involved in the internal politics and things like that, but, yeah, I hope she's doing well. I haven't seen much of her recently.
my thing is motivation.
Yeah, why?
You carry it? You carry it?
Hey,
Bonnie, let's go.
I'm doing fine.
Oh, I'm good for that.
Yes.
I was gonna say, you got your resources in the I've been at various things, every campaign event I have.
Thank you.
And I still need to get really bigger signs to put them up on Hall Street.
Okay, I have some with me, as I
So I
said.
will grab them from you.
Okay.
I'll change the next day that day.
Oh, no.
Small.
Maybe a bit busy.
busy.
Oh, I'm good, great. I'm good, I'm
In the back of the room,
set.
I would introduce you to two people. Do you have just a second?
No.
Actually, three. It'll just take a second, but, first, these are constituents of yours. How are Rebecca Henry? Hi, Rebecca.
How you doing?
Hi, how are you, Bonnie Gerard? Nice to meet you.
They were two of the biggest supporters of our campaign as far as volunteer efforts. In 2010, have you redistricted into your district?
Oh, so you're in that northern part of the
No, the city of Richmond. Eric moved the line 2 blocks to get around my house.
He moved it to get around
2
us
blocks.
specifically, we're sure of it, because he rode around with Floyd Bates on his truck.
I chased him down all over the state of Virginia when they was making his public appearances, the ones where they arrested people.
I saw on the news a truck with a Floyd Bates sign on it. This
Yeah.
is, and it was our creative campaigning. No, he didn't. To a few of us. Well, yeah, to a few of our supporters, actually, including Amy Strong, the one that,
Yeah.
she was taken out of representative.
No.
But I've introduced you to these folks because they do a great job at the end.